Hey everyone, welcome to another episode on the Asian Hustle Network podcast. Today we have Austin Chiang. Austin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Of course. So I've been following you on social media for a while now, and I love your content a lot. But I want to make sure that our audience gets to know who you are. So Austin, tell us about yourself.
Oh my gosh, where do I start? Well, I'm a physician first and foremost. I'm a gastroenterologist by training, so I treat conditions related to the gut and all the other organs related to the digestive system, whether it's the liver, the pancreas, and whatnot. But within that, I'm also I have a subspecialty in advanced endoscopy, so I focus on more complex procedures. And then from there, so I kind of have an interesting hybrid career story, which maybe we can get into deeper. But I am not only an assistant professor of medicine at Jefferson Health in Philadelphia, where I kind of do my clinical practice, but I'm also the chief medical officer for the gastrointestinal business of Medtronic worldwide. And then outside of work, kind of my side gig is really a lot of social media related work, which I'm happy to talk about more as well.
That is amazing, right? You embody the Asian Hustle Network mentality.
It was deeply ingrained in me, I'd say, from my parents, who, by the way, I should also mention, I am originally from Southern California, but moved to Taiwan when I was 10, where my parents still live. And I came back for college and beyond, and I can go through that really quickly. So I went to college at Duke in North Carolina. And then after that, went to med school at Columbia in New York. Also stayed on to do my internal medicine residency there before moving to Boston, where I did my gastroenterology fellowship, which is kind of the specialty training for this for 3 years at Brigham and Women's Hospital, where I also got my master's in public health from Harvard, and then finished my training in Philadelphia at Jefferson. So it was a total of, I want to say, 14 years or something like that after high school, 14 or 15 years.
Oh
Too
my
long.
goodness. Oh my goodness. Congratulations, by the way. It's
Thank you.
so inspiring to hear that. And you definitely walked down the golden child path, right?
But I think in retrospect, it looks like that. But, it was along the way, there was a lot of frustration, as you can imagine.
Of course.
And yeah, a lot of expectations
Yeah, let's
for
quickly
sure.
talk about that too. Like
Yeah.
talking about your personal expectations and your parents' expectations. How were
Mhm.
you able to manage both of them and still become the person that you are today?
I think that there definitely was a lot of parental pressure. I grew up in a family where my grandfather was a surgeon back in the World War II era. He unfortunately passed before I was born. But there were several physicians in my family from the generation above mine as well as my own, and so there was always kind of that lingering in the background. But I'd say that ultimately, when I was evaluating a career path, it was really the combination of my interest in science and kind of what my parents instilled in me and the opportunities they gave me as a kid, volunteering and kind of helping people out to combine those two and really feel that that was truly a good personality fit for me. And so, they kind of gave me the space to make that decision for myself. But yeah, I think it was a product of also my environment, of who I was surrounded by. Going to school, interestingly, at middle school and high school in Taiwan, where I went to the international school there, one of the international schools, and I think that being in that environment really drove me to do better because I felt the pressure just from my peers to do better. And so, yeah, it was a bit of parental pressure plus internal expectations for myself. And to this day, I think that both continue to drive me to a certain extent.
Just by talking to you during this podcast, I already feel pushed. I'm like, oh no, like now I'm
Oh, no
reevaluating my
pressure.
life.
I don't want that to become a thing.
I'm just kidding. But man, it's so inspiring hearing you walk through that path and still like do the things you like to do, right?
Yeah.
What does your day-to-day look like? I would imagine, like, you have so much going on, right? And yet you still find time to, like, respond to my emails. Like, walk us through, like, a day in life in Austin's life.
Right now it's particularly busy because I'm juggling arguably, a job and a half. And so it does come with a good amount of sacrifice, I must say. Like this is not, it might look nice from the outside, but there's a lot of, personal life that I'm putting aside for the moment. I think that I just started the Medtronic role about 6 months ago. So I told myself that, well, I really wanted to make a strong first impression and put in the hustle a little bit. And then we'll see after things kind of stabilize, then maybe I'll find some more time for myself. But yeah, a day in the life right now, it's a lot of travel, it's a lot of Zoom meetings, and it's very different. The days that I spend working in my Medtronic, with my Medtronic hat on is very different from when I'm in the hospital. So in the hospital, I'm seeing patients, either in an office setting for the entire day or doing procedures for the entire day. And so it's very fast paced and kind of just, a grind from the moment you step into the hospital until you leave. And then, with the Medtronic job, it's a little more flexible. And because my role is not really defined within a function, I oversee medical education and clinical sales training and physician engagement, but I'm also myself involved in business development and kind of talking to startup companies or involved in helping out with clinical research and marketing efforts. But it's all, there are teams devoted to each of those functions. So I just kind of put my own 2 cents in here and there for those efforts. So it keeps things exciting and fun because it's never just a one track kind of job. And the travel a lot is to, have meetings with physicians and institutions and practices out there. And it's nice because a lot of these people happen to also be my friends who, I haven't had a chance to catch up with in person because of the pandemic. So it's nice to finally see them.
Wow, it sounds very busy.
It is. No, not gonna lie about that.
Yeah. So I fully believe that the person that we are today is a person that we see that has put in years and years of work in their craft, and not only their craft, but their, personal development, right? So I mean, can you talk through like the habits that you have that helped you become the person you are today? Did you have a morning routine? Did you wake up with affirmations or, we need a system, right? As human beings, like we need a system to propel us forward and achieve our goals, right? Especially someone like you, where, in my opinion, you're a super overachiever, right? So, like, how can someone just starting out, let's say if they're like in college or early career, prepare themselves to become like where you are today?
I wish I had a really attractive system to share with everyone to say that I woke up and had a very regimented routine, because I often do hear that people who are successful have a very set kind of routine, and that kind of reflects their discipline. I think for me, growing up, I do feel like there was a lot of structure in what I did. I think part of what my parents instilled in me and what they had me go through was a lot of, I played the violin growing up, just like a lot of other people, and that was a very disciplined kind of structure, like practicing every day and preparing for certain things. But now that I'm here at this stage in my career, I think what I learned, especially being in medicine, really is prioritization. Um, because just when you think that you're so busy, in med school, your responsibilities shift after that. And, especially when you're in the hospital, doing your clinical work, taking care of patients, there's just things being thrown at you from all different directions with very short notice. And you kind of have to learn to prioritize, what is most pressing in that moment. And I think I've become pretty good at that, because, you know, I feel like a lot of people out there maybe have like this first in, first out mentality. And for me, it's a constant prioritization. So when you talk about the email that you sent me, I knew like, okay, this is something that I should jump on now, that I feel like especially when I have a moment in time, within the several weeks, I feel like, okay, now the timing is right. I should just, handle this now rather than, I know maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, things may seem open, but if I'm not able to if I commit to something, then things may change. And so that's how I sort of approach it, but it might not be right for everyone. And I think that that's also really important to consider, is that we all have a different situation and different needs and priorities. For me, my priority right now, especially being somebody who's single, who's flexible to travel, is just like myself and my career. And that's not the case for everyone. So I can't really say that will work for everybody.
That is some really, really good tips, right? I think you're right. A lot of things in life is finding there's always gonna be time, in my opinion, no matter how busy you are. It's just a matter of perspective and like priorities, right? What's most important to you? What's most urgent? Just recognizing those patterns, right? Understanding that once you recognize those patterns, you'll find actionable steps that will propel you forward no matter how busy you are.
Definitely. And I know, I think that, along the way, a lot of friends and colleagues have always told me about, having to learn how to say no. And I'm still learning how to do that. But what I do think and maybe subconsciously, I'm doing that already. It's just that I will, agree to do things or be mindful about how I spend my time towards things that I really feel are going to serve the purpose of whatever my objective is, and not be too sidetracked. But yeah, it can be very difficult.
That's added one more element.
Yeah,
You're a social media superstar with like over 500,000 subscribers, right? How do you find time for that too? Like, I
yeah,
just gonna blend it into like I gotta give our listeners perspective. I'm like, yeah, you basically have two jobs. You're a doctor. You went to 14 years of school, and you are a online social media content creator.
yeah.
Walk us through that.
Well, I'll say that my initial approach was really to combine my interest in social media with my actual kind of role and job as a doctor. So initially, if I was kind of using social media aimlessly and not productively, then I do think that it would be a giant time sink. But I think I was actually leveraging social media towards my academic goals at one point. So when I first started, my whole social media journey was born out of this desire to combat misinformation online, and recognizing that as a doctor, I was trained to talk about certain things that if I wasn't there to talk about it, other people would kind of make things up and come up with all sorts of random theories, which we're seeing a lot these days. But back then, about a decade ago, I decided to really switch over from a personal to a professional social media presence, and over the years have kind of adopted different platforms, starting from Twitter, then Instagram, then YouTube and TikTok and whatnot. But I had been faced with some resistance at the beginning, especially because people didn't quite understand the role of social media in healthcare. And I was actually advised by one of my mentors to make it a academic focus. So I started doing, I started researching social media and how it intersects with healthcare, publishing on it, actually making it, an academic pursuit. And that then led me to start a nonprofit professional society called the Association for Healthcare Social Media, which then allowed me to, work with the social media platforms directly, more closely. And currently I serve on the YouTube Health Advisory Board. And, there are a lot of their efforts are focused on misinformation now. And then from there, gained a little more attention and was able to participate in certain media opportunities. And so it became a whole thing, much bigger than I ever anticipated. But I think part of it initially was that I made it an academic kind of pursuit. But I'll say that kind of on the topic of prioritization, I realized that now that I'm working this job and a half, that the one thing that will probably have to take a back seat is social media. So in a way, it's good for my mental health because I'm doing it on my own terms now. And I'll do it when I have time, when I feel like it, when I actually feel like I have something important to say, or if I feel like I just want to, do something for fun. Um, And it wasn't always that way. I think at one point I was chasing some sort of algorithm or chasing some sort of, um, product with social media that would cause a lot of frustration. But now I'm able to just say, like, you know what, this is really definitely secondary to everything else that I'm doing. And so that balance has sort of found itself.
Yeah, and that's really good perspective too, right? Because the social media game can get really unhealthy really fast. It
Definitely. Yeah.
it changes so quickly. You have to be always on the next trend, talking about the right things, saying the right things, doing the right videos. It goes on and on. So I'm really happy to hear that you are putting yourself first, right, and taking care of your mental health. And speaking of mental health, I am pretty big on mental health, right? Do you like have any sort of meditation practices that you practice daily? What do you do when you get overwhelmed, right? And what do you do when you have bad days? Like, I would just want to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I'm the type of person who doesn't like to bottle up my emotions. So I will definitely reach out to friends and family in those situations. And again, I know that that's not necessarily how everyone would approach it, but I'm pretty much an open book with people who, with a select number of friends who I really trust. And I think that letting that out is important because for whatever the case might be, sometimes others have shared the same experiences before and can commiserate and provide guidance. And I am very grateful to have those people in my life who I can lean on in those situations. Um, but I don't have any sort of structured kind of meditation ritual or something like that. Although I do hear a great amount of benefit from those types of activities, and kind of wish that I could learn more about that. And yeah, I do the things that I enjoy, and take time for myself and prioritize. Sometimes I just feel like I have to drop everything and just take the time for myself and do something I enjoy, whether it's go eat something that I like, or watch something on Netflix. And I don't let work consume my life 100%.
Yeah, yeah. And it's good for all of us to hear that too, because like from an outside perspective, when we look at you, it's like you must have all these things down, but listen to your story, listen to your talk. It's very relatable because a lot of us feel that way, right? And sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes we're really hard on ourselves. We judge ourselves really harshly. Like maybe I'm not doing this because I'm not doing that, right? But I think that listen to your story and see how much you achieved so far in the last 14 years, 15 years. It's insane, right?
Well, and I think that I can't take credit for everything myself either. I think that I've had a lot of support along the way. I've had mentors and people who have really given me opportunity, and sometimes there is a matter of luck. And I know that there's that saying out there that says that whatever it is, like luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And in some ways I've been just I realize that I am so fortunate to have been given some opportunities because I had people who believed in me, people who noticed me when if I didn't come across some of these people, I would never have had those opportunities. So I think that to a certain extent, I think working hard is definitely an ingredient in this whole recipe. But I think also, taking the time to get to know people and to, I don't want to say network, because I feel like some of the opportunities I've gotten have not been a product of like networking per se, but just genuinely wanting to meet people and get to know people, and taking an interest in other people.
Awesome, awesome. And Austin, what is next for you? What is the next evolution of Austin Chang? I'm curious myself.
Oh, that's a really great question. I think I've gotten to where I am today without being too structured in how I plan my future. I'd say, I think I'm intentional with everything I do, but I don't really adhere too much to like, okay, this is definitely my 10-year plan. because I wouldn't have been gotten here if I was kind of if I had my blinders on like that. I've been open-minded to a lot of opportunities, and I've been open to taking risks. And so I can only imagine, a couple years down the road, what I might be presented with. And part of why I decided to kind of pivot a little bit with my career and take the Medtronic job when I was offered it was because I recognized that there may be more opportunities as a result. And so I'm open to everything, and we'll see where it takes me. And if you asked me 5 years ago if I would have imagined being here today, the answer would definitively be no. So I'm just going to keep an open mind and just see where things take me.
I like that. I like the mentality a lot, and I hope that you end up starting like a bling empire in Philadelphia because I definitely want to watch that show.
We'll see.
But yes, so as our listeners know, at the beginning of our podcast, this episode is promoting the HHS COVID-19 public education campaign, and we're excited to have Austin talk about the misinformation and talking about getting vaccinated and the benefits of getting vaccinated against COVID, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't think of a better person to ask to come on the podcast to speak about this besides you, because your content is based upon this.
Thank you. I mean, at one point, definitely, especially at the height of the pandemic, I think I was speaking about this a lot because I felt obligated, to speak from the perspective of a health professional and what we see in the hospital, because it's often behind closed doors. And there's a lot of theories, conspiracy theories out there and whatnot about all of this. And from someone who's actually taking care of patients, I think that it was important for us to speak out. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was very interesting that, in talking about this a lot, that it ultimately landed me on the front page of the New York Times at one point, the day that the first vaccine was rolled out. And the headline was about how I would talk about this on TikTok. I admittedly talk a little bit less about it now because it's been a while. Obviously the pandemic has been going on for a minute now. But yeah, there's a lot of misinformation circulating out there, and I would just say, be careful about who you trust online, and really double and triple check to make sure that they have the credentials to talk about the things they talk about. And there's a lot of nuances about this. And I also, kind of along the lines of keeping an open mind, the way science is, I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize that science is constantly changing, and we can only operate on the best data that we have available. And if we find new things down the road that lead us to believe otherwise, then we will change our strategy and our recommendations. But things will change over time, and we just kind of have to roll with it. But yeah, I think that myself, I have been vaccinated, boosted. The recommendations may change down the road as we see new variants and new developments evolve. But I do still think that it's the best course of action to prevent severe disease as a result of the virus. And it doesn't prevent you from getting the virus; it just minimizes the effects of it. And especially now with kind of impending surge, it seems it's really important that we protect ourselves and those around us too.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, right? I think now that most mask mandates are, pretty lenient now, and you don't see a
Yeah,
lot of people wearing it, to be honest. And I find myself not wearing it sometimes too. Like, oh no, I forgot my mask. Oh, whatever. Right. But I know
yeah.
that it's still very important for us to stay safe out there because this virus is still very much real. It is still very much here. Right. Out of curiosity, what kind of misinformation have you heard about the vaccines before? Because I think the funniest thing I heard early on was there's government chips inside the vaccine shot
Yeah,
and they can track your every movement and thoughts. I'm like, that's pretty futuristic way of thinking about vaccines.
yeah. Yeah, I made I made a TikTok about that actually like early on because I just thought it was so ridiculous. And I think that look, I think that there is a healthy dose of skepticism that everyone can have. I think it's always good to again double and triple check everything that you're reading. But at a certain point, like there are experts out there who are the people who talk about or who have done the research and who are actively involved in the development of the vaccines and whatnot, who we have to trust. Otherwise, like there's a certain degree of trust that we have to do to exercise for everything that we do. And Yeah, that is like one of the most ridiculous ones, I must say. But at the same time, I think it was easier to dispel. I'm sure there are people out there who still believe that, but there's a lot that, especially on social media, we see a lot of really random things. That,
What's the most random thing you saw?
I mean, probably that one, honestly. Yeah. And I mean, there's also things that, I think the biggest concern is that there are all sorts of random side effects that people attribute to vaccines. And a lot of this is not based off of any data, it's anecdotal, it's, based off of faulty reporting. And it can be scary because it's sometimes hard to disprove as well. And it's you know there's there needs to be a basic understanding of how the science works, like how these sorts of vaccines are made as well, that I think we could do a better job with messaging. But yeah, I think that we hopefully will see that people are understanding of this. I think that I come from a different perspective, having I actually was in Taiwan when SARS hit back my senior year in high school, which I might be dating myself a little bit here. But I think that plays into why there's cultural differences in how we approach the pandemic too. Like the mentality that people have approached the pandemic with abroad seems to be pretty different than here. And mask wearing and whatnot is it's kind of like why not over there versus here it's like why should we and we'll see. I think that hopefully we can all learn from this experience so that the next pandemic, whenever it happens, because we all know that it's bound to happen at some point in the future again, we're better prepared.
Yeah, I could agree more. And I think I saw like a speech by I think Bill Gates or something. He was saying that the scary thing about this pandemic is that one, it showed us how underprepared we are for a pandemic. And two, that moving forward, because of globalization, all these trade things, that the pandemic situation for other viruses are going to break out in a more frequent basis,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly. And I think it also shows how important kind of communicating and messaging and media plays into a public health response. um, it's fascinating, like in this day and age, how that really can drive public opinion. And to think that, especially we just hit the 1 million person milestone where there's been 1 million people in the US who've died of the virus. And I feel like there's been, very little coverage about this, or that there's been kind of this indifference to the whole thing. And I get it. People are tired of it. Like I'm tired of it too. Like who isn't? But one can only hope that yeah, in the future, we are more prepared. And I know that there are efforts to prepare for the next one. And my understanding was that even going into this one, we had a plan, but it just wasn't very well executed. So hopefully, um, if it's during our lifetime, we all, can remember what happened here so that we can, have a better plan.
Definitely. And since this segment is paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, go get vaccinated.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think it, by the way, I think it's great that they are, doing this sort of outreach because clearly they value, the voice of, you and all of us, kind of a grassroots sort of community type way of approaching it. And ultimately, Health and Human Services, we depend on them, like they really dictate everything that we do in healthcare, and they do a good job in a lot of ways in regulating it. So, it's something that I obviously care deeply about is how healthcare functions and how we make sure people get the right treatment and right prevention and whatnot when it comes to their daily lives.
Yeah, I could agree more. And Austin, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. You are a mega overachiever.
I'll try not to be, but
And honestly, it's awesome to hear your story. And thank you so much on your thoughts and feedback on getting boosted and vaccinated as well. We could have found a more qualified person to come on the podcast. We appreciate you so much in your time.
thank you so much for having me again.
Of course. So one last question, Austin. How can our listeners find out more about you and reach out to you online?
I am very easy to find on the internet. It's basically my name, Austin Chiang, MD. That's my handle basically on all platforms, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok. What am I leaving out? But I'm pretty easy to find, and feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Of course. So we'll leave all that in the show notes. Austin, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.